Welcome to the ADEQ Drinking Water Monitoring Waiver Training. This presentation will review the Drinking Water Monitoring Waiver application process. First, let's talk about what monitoring waivers are. Arizona Department of Environmental Quality has authority to develop a monitoring waiver program designed to set monitoring frequencies based on a system's history, use, and vulnerability to certain regulated contaminants. These monitoring waivers allow us to help water systems reduce monitoring costs and transfer those savings to facility upgrades or improvements, while still allowing us to protect and enhance public health and the environment of Arizona. Another benefit of this process is that it helps systems understand where their water comes from, how it can be contaminated, and what measures can be taken to protect their water source. Next, we will discuss what types of monitoring waivers are available. We provide monitoring waivers for inorganic chemicals, volatile organic chemicals, and synthetic organic chemicals. These waivers are approved or denied per EPDS, or Entry Point to the Distribution System, compliance sampling points. For all these waiver types, EPDS sources must have a source water protection plan. Conducting a hydrogeologic study can replace the source water protection plan. To be eligible for a monitoring waiver for the first group of chemicals, IOCs, sources for the EPDS must have conducted at least 3 monitoring periods of analytical testing for EPA's regulated drinking water IOCs. These test results must be 75% or less of the maximum contaminant levels. Additionally, no new or recently reactivated sources can be flowing to the EPDS. If the EPDS is approved for a monitoring waiver, the required monitoring schedule is reduced from its current schedule to once every 9 years for both groundwater and surface water systems. To be eligible for a VOC monitoring waiver, the sources for the EPDS must have conducted at least 3 monitoring periods of analytical testing for EPA's regulated drinking water VOCs, with no detections of any of these chemicals. Additionally, no new or recently reactivated sources can be flowing to the EPDS. For these waivers, the system must show that VOCs have not been used in the equipment used in the production, storage, or distribution of the drinking water at the EPDS. There must also be adequate distance between the sources and any potential sources of VOCs, as outlined in a wellhead or source water protection plan. If the EPDS is approved for a monitoring waiver, the required monitoring schedule is reduced to once every 6 years for groundwater systems. ADEQ has opted not to approve VOC monitoring waivers for surface water systems, which I'll explain a little later. Finally, to be eligible for an SOC monitoring waiver, the sources for the EPDS must have conducted at least 3 monitoring periods of analytical testing for EPA's regulated drinking water SOCs, with no detection of any of these chemicals. No new or recently reactivated sources can be flowing to the EPDS. For these waivers also, the system must show that there has not been any use of SOCs in the equipment used in the production, storage, or distribution of the drinking water at the EPDS. There must also be adequate distance between the sources and any potential sources of SOCs, as outlined in a wellhead source or source water protection plan. Additionally, there can be no elevated nitrate or nitrite levels in the water source supply. If an EPDS at a groundwater system is approved for an SOC monitoring waiver, the required monitoring schedule would be reduced to once every 9 years for those serving populations less than 3,300, and twice every 9 years for those serving populations of 3,300 or more. ADEQ has opted not to approve SOC monitoring waivers for surface water systems. Though monitoring waivers are approved for 6 or 9-year periods, there are requirements systems must fulfill within that time frame to maintain the waiver. They must recertify waiver applications every 3 years to demonstrate to ADEQ that there have been no significant changes, and they must sample at least once per waived monitoring period. Now let's discuss the waiver applications. Each waiver application covers an individual EPDS. We encourage you to review Appendix A of the monitoring waiver application for eligibility of your source before submitting. ADEQ is not currently accepting applications from systems enrolled in the Monitoring Assistance Program. Because this program is already designed to reduce monitoring costs for the systems, there is no additional cost benefit if approved for a monitoring waiver. When working through a monitoring waiver application, you'll be asked about whether sources for the EPDS have been recently activated or reactivated. If the answer is yes, the last compliance results must include the new or reactivated sources in order for the application to be approved. IOC applications require at least 3 monitoring periods of compliant analytical testing of EPA-regulated drinking water IOCs with no detection above 75% of the MCL. SOC and VOC applications require the same, but with no detections over the reporting limits. If the application is to renew an expiring waiver, the compliance sample taken during the waiver period must meet the same requirements. If the EPDS was given an MCL violation for any of the contaminants being applied for within the past 15 years, the application will not be approved. VOC and SOC chemicals stored or used near the vicinity of your system's drinking water wells must be evaluated to determine potential impacts to the wells. Adjacent land use must be evaluated within a half-mile radius of the wells. Appendix D of the VOC and SOC applications contains a form to aid in ALU determination. This land use determination form for SOCs helps applicants determine if a facility may be an ALU. This form includes facility information, chemicals and quantities used, stored, transported, or manufactured at the facility. An SOC chemical list is provided in Appendix B of the application. 5 gallons or 40 pounds or less of residential strength SOC chemicals are considered de minimis quantities and are exempt from application reporting requirements. If any SOC chemical spills have occurred at the ALU, they must be listed on the form in addition to any best management practices utilized at the ALU. The VOC land use determination form helps VOC applicants determine if a facility may be an ALU. The Appendix D for VOCs collects much of the same information as the Appendix D for SOCs, including an accompanying chemical list provided in Appendix B. De minimis quantities exempt from application reporting are 5 gallons or 40 pounds or less of residential strength VOC chemicals and 50 gallons or less of gasoline, diesel, or used oil. ALU spill information and best management practices are also collected at the bottom of this form. If no ALUs are identified within a half-mile radius of the system's drinking water wells, the applicant must still submit a map of the area identifying the half-mile radius and including the well location. For ALUs located within the half-mile radius of the well, the applicant must label the ALU on the map and the source data sheet located in Appendix G of the VOC and SOC applications. The source data sheet in Appendix G contains space to list ALU facility information, location data, and whether the facility is implementing best management practices to reduce the chance of VOC or SOC chemicals impacting soil and groundwater. The required ALU map information must contain a map for each drinking water well and the source well plotted and labeled with the appropriate ADWR well 55 number, along with each ALU within a half-mile radius of the source well. Also, ALU labels corresponding with the source data sheet located in Appendix G, a depiction of a 1, 3, and 10-year fixed calculated radius time of contaminant travel area, which represents the time of travel in which the source well could be impacted if a release occurred at a given ALU, a scale and north arrow, and the water system name and number. This VOC waiver application map shows all the information we just discussed, including the circular time of travel calculations, well data, all relevant ALU information listed in the source data sheet, the north arrow, and facility name and system number. This SOC waiver application map shows all the required information we discussed previously, and when calculating distances over facilities that cover a large area, calculate the distance based on the facility boundary closest to the well. The fixed radius calculation shown is used to determine the 1, 3, and 10-year time of travel intervals. The capacity of the pump and well construction information must be known to use the fixed radius equation. In the equation, the variables are as follows. The fixed radius is equal to R. The pump rate of the source well in cubic feet per year is represented as Q. So if the pump rate of the subject well is given in gallons per minute, it must be converted to cubic feet per year. The time of travel in years is equal to T. The specific yield of the regional aquifer is represented as N. If this value is unknown, a default value of 0.15 can be used in the equation. Finally, the length of the well screen below the water table is represented as KL. This calculation cannot be used in source wells screened within hard rock formations or if the well pump rate and subsurface lithology is unknown. In these cases, the default half-mile radius must be used and plotted on the map. So let's cover a quick example. This fixed radius equation calculation is for a 10-year time of travel with a pumping rate of 50 gallons per minute. Converting the pumping rate cubic feet per year is obtained by multiplying 50 times 70,267, resulting in a pump rate of 3,513,350 cubic feet per year. Multiplying this pump rate by the 10-year time of travel yields about 35.1 million, which is placed in the numerator of the equation. Pi multiplied by the specific yield multiplied by length of the well below the water table, 170 feet, is equal to 80.07, which goes in the denominator of the equation, resulting in the square root of 438,784. So taking the square root of that number yields a result of 662 feet, which is equal to the time of travel. So all units cancel out in this equation, resulting in a time of travel units of feet. The certification page of the application must be signed and dated by the person preparing the application and the water system owner or representative. This page certifies that the application is accurate and complete, and the source wells have been installed correctly and are in good working condition. The ADEQ monitoring waiver program will not approve monitoring waivers where groundwater drinking water sources are under direct influence of surface water. This would include lakes, reservoirs, canals, rivers, and streams based on surface waters having high risk for contamination, and the extent of vulnerability from these sources would be too onerous. Applications will be denied if one or more new sources have been added at any time over the last 3 monitoring periods, if an EPDS within the application has had an MCL violation for the VOC or SOC contaminant within the last 15 years, if the last 3 monitoring periods have had a detect of over 75% of an IOC being applied for, or if the last 3 monitoring periods have had a detection above the laboratory reporting limit for SOCs or VOCs, or if there's any new water source within a 1-year time of travel, or if there's any water source within a 3-year time of travel where best management practices have not been implemented, or if a water source is within 100 feet of a septic tank system or septic leach fields, or if a groundwater source is suspected to be under direct influence of surface water, or if violations exist for relevant ADEQ permits issued to the water system, or finally, if a water quality assurance revolving fund program release or a remedial project associated with contaminants listed in Appendix B is within a 10-year time of travel from the drinking water source. Waivers are granted based on risk to the water source and may be denied based on risk-based criteria or lack of information provided within the application. Timelines for monitoring waiver applications. How long the applications will take to complete depends on how many applications are submitted, how many sources each EPDS has, and how many ALUs are identified. Schedule at least 2 weeks and up to 4 months to complete these applications each time. If you'll be submitting more than 5 applications, or if this is your first year submitting, ADEQ strongly recommends requesting a pre-application meeting to review the necessary requirements before submission. By statute, ADEQ has 21 days to perform the administrative review. If your application is suspended in this phase, you'll be given 5 days to submit the missing information. We then have 105 days to perform a substantive review. If your application is suspended during this review, you'll be given 30 days to submit the missing information. Our goal is a turnaround time of 10 to 15 business days, but this will be dependent on the number of applications submitted in a given year. Once a decision has been made, an approval or denial letter will be sent to the owner or responsible party of the system. Applications can be downloaded from the Monitoring Waiver webpage under Forms. The deadline for a new waiver is October 1st in the year before the waiver will begin. Renewal applications for expiring waivers must be submitted no later than October 1st in the last year of the current waiver. Recertifications must be submitted no later than October 1st in the 3rd and 6th year of the waiver, if applicable. In this example on the screen, a 9-year IOC waiver that was approved for the monitoring period of 2020 through 2028 would require a recertification form by October 1st, 2022, and again by October 1st, 2025. If the system would like to reapply for the waiver for the next period starting in 2029, the application would be due no later than October 1st, 2028. However, we strongly recommend submitting your applications even earlier to allow time to fix any errors or omissions before the deadline. To ensure that land use information is correct and accurate, July 1st is the earliest an application may be submitted. Contact us here to request a pre-application meeting or to submit applications and recertification forms. To submit forms, just attach the PDF or Word document to an email and send it to this email address with a quick note. Thank you.